This was a tragic life that football tried to forget. John Charles was supposed to be the gentle giant who had it all, the perfect player, the perfect gentleman, the perfect career. But what they never told you was how it all ended. The truth behind his final years is something the football world kept quiet about. This is the real story of how Britain's greatest ever footballer went from glory at Juventus to a hospital bed with his foot cut off. How does someone go from being Serie A's top scorer to fighting gangrene in a Yorkshire hospital? How does the man who never got booked in his entire career end up forgotten and alone? Let's go back to where it all began. William John Charles was born on December 27, 1931, in Swansea, Wales. Football was in his blood from day one. He started at his hometown club before making the move that would change everything, signing for Leeds United in 1948 at just 17 years old. But Charles wasn't your typical footballer. He was massive, 6 foot 2 inches of pure muscle and skill. What made him special wasn't just his size, though. He could play anywhere on the pitch and dominate completely. Defender? No problem. Striker? Even better. The man was unstoppable. After his national service ended in 1952, Leeds moved him up front permanently. The results were incredible. Charles became the second division's top scorer in 1954. When they made him captain, he led Leeds straight to promotion. This wasn't luck, this was pure class. But the really amazing thing about Charles, he never got a booking. Not one yellow card in his entire career. Never sent off, never hurt another player on purpose. In an era when football was rough and dirty, Charles played like a gentleman. That's how he got the nickname that would stick forever, the Gentle Giant. In 1957, everything changed. Juventus came calling with an offer that shocked the football world. £65,000. That was a world record transfer fee. To put that in perspective, that's like paying £50 million today. Leeds had no choice but to sell. Charles arrived in Turin and immediately became a legend. Italian football had never seen anything like him. In 5 seasons, he scored 93 goals in 155 games. Think about that. A goal every other game while playing in the toughest league in the world. The trophies came flooding in. 3 Serie A titles, 2 Coppa Italia wins. In the 1957-58 season, he was Serie A's top goal scorer. The Italian fans didn't just respect him, they worshipped him. Here was this Welsh giant who could score headers, strike from distance, and create chances for everyone else. On the international stage, Charles was just as dominant. 38 caps for Wales, 15 goals, and he helped them reach their first ever World Cup in 1958. An injury stopped him from playing in the quarterfinal against Brazil, but by then he'd already made history. The numbers tell the story, but they don't tell you about the respect he earned. Charles played football the right way. No dirty tackles, no arguing with referees, no cheating. In Italy, where football is taken deadly seriously, they called him Il Gigante Buono, the good giant. But success abroad came with a price. Charles's wife was homesick. She missed Wales, missed family, missed home. So in 1962, Charles made the decision that would change everything. He came back to Leeds. This should have been a fairy tale homecoming, the local hero returning to lead his boyhood club to glory. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. Charles was 31 now, and football had moved on. The training was different under Don Revie. The pace was faster, the game had changed, and Charles struggled to keep up. He only played 11 games for Leeds in his second spell. 11 games. The man who had conquered Italy couldn't get in the Leeds team anymore. It was heartbreaking to watch. Desperate to prove himself, Charles went back to Italy, this time to Roma. But it was the same story. Just 10 appearances before injuries and arguments with the coach ended that dream too. His knees were gone, his pace was fading, and suddenly, the gentle giant looked very human. Charles came home to Wales and signed for Cardiff City, where he played alongside his brother Mel. It was a nice touch, but everyone knew this was the end. He retired from league football in 1966, age 35. He kept playing at lower levels until he was 42, managing teams like Hereford United and Merthyr Tydfil, but the magic was gone. Football had made Charles famous, but it hadn't made him rich. Not like today's players. When he retired, he needed to make a living. So he tried business, a restaurant in Turin and a sports shop in Cardiff. Both failed completely. The restaurant failure hit him hard financially. The sports shop going under made things worse. Then in 1982, his marriage fell apart. The divorce settlement was another massive blow to his finances. The man who had been earning world record transfer fees was now struggling to pay his bills. This is where Charles's story gets really sad. He'd given everything to football, his body, his prime years, his health, but football hadn't looked after him in return. There were no massive pension schemes back then, no image rights deals, no endorsement contracts. When you stopped playing, the money stopped too. Charles tried to stay positive. He'd always been a gentleman, never complained publicly, never blamed anyone else for his problems. But privately, the stress was building. The financial pressure was constant. And there was something else happening that nobody talked about at the time. Charles had been a smoker his whole life. Back in the 1950s and 60s, everyone smoked, players, managers, fans. Nobody knew how dangerous it was. Nobody warned you about cancer or heart disease. You just smoking caught up with him. Charles had his first heart attack at 62. He survived, but it was a warning. Then in 1997 came worse news, bladder cancer. The man who had never been seriously injured playing football was now fighting for his life. The cancer treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Charles went through it all. But he was tough. He'd always been tough. He fought the cancer and won, at least for a while. But something else was happening. Charles was starting to forget things. Little things at first. Names, dates, where he'd put his keys. Then bigger things. His family noticed he was getting confused more often. The diagnosis was devastating. Alzheimer's disease. January 2004 started like any other month for Charles. He was scheduled to do a television interview in Italy about his playing days. It should have been a nice trip down memory lane. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Just before the interview, Charles had another heart attack. This one was massive. He collapsed and was rushed to hospital in Italy. The damage was severe. His circulation was failing. Blood wasn't getting to his extremities properly. Within days, gangrene set in. Charles's foot was dying. The doctors had no choice. They had to amputate part of it to save his life. The gentle giant, who had used his feet to score goals across Europe, now had one foot partially cut off. But here's where the story gets beautiful, even in tragedy. Juventus, the club he'd played for 40 years earlier, heard what was happening. They didn't hesitate. They sent an air ambulance complete with doctors and nurses to bring Charles home to Britain. They paid for everything, the flight, the medical team, the whole operation. Think about that. A football club spending tens of thousands of pounds to help a former player they hadn't employed for decades. That tells you everything about how much respect Charles had earned. Even in his darkest hour, people remembered what kind of man he was. Charles was taken to Pinderfields Hospital in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. His family gathered around him. The Alzheimer's meant he wasn't always sure where he was or who was visiting. The cancer was spreading again. His heart was failing. Multiple diseases were attacking him at once. On February 21st, 2004, in the early hours of the morning, William John Charles died. He was 72 years old. The cause wasn't just one thing, it was everything together. Heart failure, cancer complications, circulation problems from the amputation, and the slow destruction of Alzheimer's. The man who had never been sent off in his entire career had finally been defeated. Not by another player, not by injury, but by time and disease, and the simple fact that even giants truly tragic. Not how he died, but how he was forgotten while he was dying. Football moved on, new stars emerged. The game became about money and marketing and social media followers. Charles belonged to a different era, when players shook hands after matches, when getting booked was shameful, when football was played for love, not just money. When Juventus observed a minute's silence for Charles, it turned into applause. That's his real legacy. Not the trophies or the records, but the respect he earned by doing things the right way. The gentle giant may have had a tragic ending, but his life was anything but tragic. The sad end of Dean Richards was more than just a tragic headline. It was the final chapter of a footballer whose life was marked by incredible talent, crushing setbacks, and a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Dean Richards was born on June 9, 1974, in Bradford, England. From an early age, it was clear he had something special. He started his professional journey at his hometown club, Bradford City, where he made over 80 appearances between 1992 and 1995. Even as a young defender, Dean showed the qualities that would make him a fan favorite wherever he went. His talent didn't go unnoticed. In 1995, Wolverhampton Wanderers came calling, and Dean made the move that would truly launch his career. At Wolves, he became more than just a player. He became a legend. Over 4 years, he made 145 appearances and won the hearts of supporters with his committed defending and leadership on the pitch. But Dean's story took a dark turn in January 1996. During his time at Wolves, he was involved in a car crash that would change everything. At first, doctors thought he had just bruised his ankle. It seemed like a minor setback that any footballer might face. However, as time went on, the true extent of his injuries became clear. The crash had caused serious damage to his knee and back, injuries that would plague him for the rest of his career. These weren't just niggling problems that could be managed with rest and treatment. Dean missed significant portions of the following 2 seasons because of complications from the accident. It was a cruel twist of fate for a player who was just hitting his stride. The injuries became a constant companion, limiting his ability to train and play at the level he knew he was capable of. Despite these setbacks, Dean refused to give up on his dreams. His determination and skill earned him a move to Southampton in 1999 on a free transfer. He spent 2 years there, making 78 appearances and proving he still had plenty to offer at the highest level of English football. Then came the move that would define his career. In September 2001, Tottenham Hotspur paid £8.1 million to bring Dean to North London. This wasn't just any transfer, it was a record-breaking fee. Dean became the most expensive player ever bought by a club who had never been capped for his country. It was recognition of his extraordinary talent and potential. At Spurs, Dean continued to show glimpses of brilliance, but his injury problems persisted. Over 4 years, he managed just 81 appearances. Every time he seemed to be finding his rhythm, his body would let him down. It was heartbreaking for fans and devastating for Dean himself, who knew he had so much more to give. But the worst was yet to come. During his time at Tottenham, Dean began experiencing new and alarming symptoms. He suffered from frequent dizzy spells and persistent headaches that were affecting his ability. This was something different, something more serious. At first, doctors thought it might be an inner ear infection. It seemed like a reasonable explanation for the dizziness and could be treated relatively easily. But as the symptoms continued, medical staff decided to investigate further. Dean underwent a brain scan to check for more serious conditions, including the possibility of a brain tumor. The results of that scan brought both relief and confusion. The test came back negative for a tumor, and doctors said the likelihood of Dean having a brain tumor was extremely low. This should have been good news, but the symptoms weren't going away, and doctors were still concerned. Despite the negative scan results, medical specialists delivered devastating news to Dean. They had found an abnormality on the brain and warned him that continuing to play professional football could be life-threatening. The risk was clear and terrifying. If he kept playing, he could suffer a brain hemorrhage. Faced with this stark choice between his career and his life, Dean made the only decision he could. In March 2005, at just 30 years old, he announced his retirement from professional football. It was a heartbreaking moment for a player who still felt he had years of football left in him. The severity of his condition was recognized officially when Dean received a £2 million insurance payout in 2006. This was reported as the highest amount ever paid to an individual player in the United Kingdom for such a claim. It confirmed that his career-ending illness was genuine and permanent. Despite his health problems, Dean wasn't ready to walk away from football completely. In August 2007, he returned to Bradford City, the club where it all began, as a part-time youth team coach. It showed his enduring love for the game and his desire to pass on his knowledge to the next generation. He also spent some time working with a company in Spain during this period. For 6 years after his retirement, Dean lived relatively quietly. There were few public updates about his health, though reports consistently referred to him dealing with a long-term illness. His family and former clubs chose to keep details of his condition private, which was completely understandable, given the personal nature of his struggles. The end came on Saturday, February 26, 2011. Dean passed away at St. Gemma's Hospice in Leeds, where he had been admitted earlier that week. He was just 36 years old, a tragically young age for anyone, but especially shocking for a former professional athlete who should have had decades of life ahead of him. The news of Dean's death sent shockwaves through the football world. Tottenham Hotspur and Wolverhampton Wanderers, the two clubs where he had made his biggest impact, both issued official statements confirming his death to a long-term illness. But, crucially, they did not specify the exact cause of death. The tributes that followed showed just how much Dean meant to the football community. Former clubs organized minutes of silence before matches, and fans created chants to honor his memory. His funeral was held in his hometown of Bradford and was attended by numerous former teammates, underlining the deep respect and affection he had earned throughout his career. But even in death, mystery surrounded Dean Richards. The lack of specific medical details about his final illness led to widespread speculation. Many media reports suggested he had died from a brain tumor or cancer, linking back to the brain abnormality that had ended his career. However, his family never confirmed these reports, maintaining their privacy about the exact nature of his condition. This created a strange situation where the public understanding of Dean's death became a mixture of established facts and unverified speculation. The early brain scan had been negative for a tumor, yet many people believed that's what ultimately killed him. The truth remained known only to his family and closest friends. What we do know for certain is that Dean Richards was a footballer of exceptional talent whose career was cruelly cut short by forces beyond his control. From his early days at Bradford City to his record transfer to Tottenham, he showed courage, skill, and determination that earned him respect wherever he played. The car crash in 1996 marked the beginning of a series of health challenges that would define the rest of his life. Yet through all the setbacks, the pain, and the uncertainty, Dean continued to pursue his passion for football until he simply couldn't anymore. His decision to return to coaching at Bradford City showed that even when his playing days were over, his love for the game remained strong. He wanted to give something back, to help young players avoid some of the pitfalls he had encountered, and to share the knowledge he had gained through years of playing at the highest level. Dean Richards' story is ultimately one of a man who faced extraordinary challenges with dignity and grace. While the exact circumstances of his death may remain unclear, what is crystal clear is the impact he had on everyone who knew him or watched him play. He will be remembered not for the mystery surrounding his final illness, but for the joy he brought to football fans, the respect he earned from teammates and opponents alike, and the courage he showed in facing whatever life threw at him. Dean Richards was more than just a footballer. He was an inspiration.
Jack Charlton's tragic end came in July 2020, when dementia and lymphoma claimed one of football's greatest defenders at age 85. The public mourned a World Cup hero, but few understood the private battles that had defined his extraordinary life. The Finding Jack Charlton documentary revealed a cruel irony. A man who created unforgettable moments for millions could no longer remember them himself. But behind the decline was a warrior who gave everything for his country, and then gave his heart to another. Born in the coal mining village of Ashington, Jack Charlton was built for battle. His 23-year career at Leeds United would make him a club legend, but it was the way he fought that set him apart. From 1950 to 1973, he never played for another team. 773 appearances, one club, one man's unwavering loyalty in an age when such dedication was rare. Under Don Revie's management, Leeds United became known as Dirty Leeds, a team that used every trick, every tactical edge, every physical advantage to win. But Jack wasn't dirty. He was clever. While others saw a bruising centre-back, Jack was revolutionising defensive football. He pioneered zonal marking systems that are standard today. He perfected the art of disrupting goalkeepers at corners, positioning himself to block their movement. What looked like thuggery was actually tactical genius. The famous altercation with Dennis Law during an FA Cup semi-final showed Jack's honesty. He admitted grabbing Law's shirt, leading to punches being thrown. "You had to hang on to Dennis because he was so sharp and so good in the air," Jack said later. "I used to hate playing against him. No excuses, no lies, just brutal honesty about what it took to compete at the highest level." His son later recalled how his father had ripped off Denny Law's shirt during the fracas, with fists flying everywhere. Off the pitch, Jack was a stickler for order. Young autograph hunters had to form straight lines before he would sign for them. Discipline mattered. Respect mattered. These weren't just football values. They were life principles that would serve him well beyond playing. His teammates knew him as robust rather than dirty, a defender who combined physical presence with strategic thinking. In 1966, Jack's defensive partnership with Norman Hunter helped England lift their only World Cup. Playing alongside his younger brother Bobby, they defeated West Germany 4-2 at Wembley, two brothers from Ashington standing together as world champions. It should have been the perfect family moment. Instead, it marked the beginning of a feud that would tear them apart for over a decade. The problem wasn't football, it was family. Jack blamed Bobby's wife, Norma, for keeping his brother away from their mother, Sissy. The personal discord led to Bobby not visiting their mother for extended periods. When their mother was dying, Jack publicly criticised Bobby for his perceived failure to visit in her final days. The attack was scathing and very public. Bobby responded in his autobiography, calling Jack's criticism a big mistake and providing his own account of events. For over 10 years, the Charlton brothers maintained significant distance. They exchanged pleasantries at annual World Cup reunion dinners, but the warmth was gone. Bobby hadn't seen his mother after 1992, a direct consequence of the escalating family feud. Two of England's greatest footballers, bonded by shared triumph, separated by private pain that highlighted how even national heroes can navigate profound personal divisions. The public glimpsed a possible reconciliation in December 2008. Jack presented Bobby with the BBC Sports Personality Lifetime Achievement Award. Bobby said he was knocked out by the gesture. The crowd gave them a standing ovation. But this appeared to be more performance than genuine healing, a public display that allowed for unity while private distance continued, raising questions about authenticity versus strategic presentation for their shared legacy. Jack's greatest triumph came not in England, but in Ireland. When he was appointed Republic of Ireland manager in February 1986, many were sceptical. An Englishman managing Ireland during some of the worst years of the Troubles? Early banners at his first match in Lansdowne Road read, "Go home Union Jack." But Jack's authentic personality won them over completely. He was described as relatable as he was likeable. His earthy humour and straight-talking manner transcended political divisions. Irish fans didn't just accept him, they adopted him. His presence demanded that a different aspect of Englishness be accommodated within the popular discourse. He became living proof that sport could bridge even the deepest cultural divides through genuine human connection. Under Jack's management, Ireland achieved unprecedented international success. Euro 1988 marked their first major finals appearance. The 1990 World Cup saw them reach the quarter-finals, with the whole nation celebrating in the streets. The 1994 World Cup followed. 3 major tournaments in 8 years for a country that had never qualified before Jack's arrival. Jack's tactical approach combined innovation with pragmatism. He deployed central defenders as holding midfielders and emphasised attacking fullbacks. Most importantly, he famously mined the Irish diaspora, successfully integrating British-born players with Irish heritage like Ray Houghton and John Aldridge into the squad alongside homegrown talent. His direct, long-ball strategy wasn't always pretty, but it was devastatingly effective. The honours reflected his transformative impact. He was awarded the Freedom of Dublin City in 1994 and granted honorary Irish citizenship in 1995, a rare honour bestowed on only 12 people since the Irish Nationality and Citizenship Act was established in 1956. He had become an adopted national hero, proving that authenticity and character matter more than passport colour or political background. By 1996, when Jack stepped down from the Ireland role, he had presided over an era of unparalleled Irish achievement in international football. More than sporting success, he had united a nation through football, significantly boosting the sport's popularity and creating a powerful sense of collective well-being that transcended traditional political boundaries and historical animosities. But Jack's final years revealed football's hidden cost. His dementia diagnosis, alongside similar cases affecting his brother Bobby and other 1966 teammates like Nobby Stiles, significantly amplified growing concern about neurodegenerative diseases in former footballers. The landmark 2019 field study at the University of Glasgow demonstrated that ex-professional footballers are 3.5 times more likely to die from dementia than the general population. This increased risk is often associated with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a neurodegenerative disease caused by repeated head injuries, including the cumulative impact of heading heavy leather balls throughout long careers. High-profile cases like former West Brom striker Jeff Astl's death in 2002, attributed by a coroner to repeated minor head traumas from football, had served as early catalysts for these critical investigations. The Finding Jack Charlton documentary captured his decline with heartbreaking honesty. The quick-witted, charismatic leader was visibly diminished, struggling to recall key moments from his illustrious career. The film contrasted the sharp, honest Charlton of his prime with the slower man battling memory loss. The footage was described as upsetting and strikingly candid, highlighting the painful irony of moments that will live forever in the memory of an entire people being cruelly erased from the mind of the person who played such a pivotal role in creating them. Jack's death accelerated football's reckoning with brain injuries. The Football Association and Professional Footballers Association have partnered with organisations like Alzheimer's Society to raise awareness, fund crucial research, and provide support services. Key initiatives include establishing brain health support funds, lobbying for recognition of sport-caused neurodegeneration as an industrial disease, and funding comprehensive studies into the long-term cognitive effects of heading. Jack Charlton's story is one of contradictions that somehow created perfect harmony. He was fierce but fair, loyal but stubborn, beloved but isolated. His one-club career showed unwavering dedication. His World Cup triumph demonstrated defensive excellence. His Irish success proved inspirational leadership. His public feuds revealed uncomfortable honesty. His final battle highlighted human vulnerability. People loved Jack, not because he was perfect, but because he was real. In an era of manufactured personalities and careful media management, Jack remained authentically himself. His earthiness and lack of pretense resonated with ordinary people who saw their own struggles and values reflected in his journey from coal mining village to international stardom. His legacy extends far beyond trophies and international caps. He showed that an Englishman could become an Irish icon through respect, genuine connection, and shared commitment. He proved that tactical innovation could emerge from football's supposedly rougher edges. He demonstrated that personal flaws and public disputes don't necessarily diminish genuine public service or sporting achievement. The tragedy wasn't just his death from dementia and lymphoma, but what football lost with it, a voice of uncompromising honesty in a world increasingly defined by careful spin and image management. Big Jack didn't just change games or win trophies. He changed nations, united divided communities, and reminded everyone that sport, at its very best, can bridge the deepest cultural and political divides through authentic human connection.
The sad end. That's what the headline said. Sir Alf Ramsay, the man who brought football home, died alone in a nursing home, forgotten and broke. The only England manager to ever win a World Cup, reduced to a £25 a week pension. But this isn't just a story of a tragic death. It's the journey of a genius who changed English football forever and was betrayed by those he served. How did the man who gave England its greatest footballing moment, the architect of our only World Cup victory, end up so abandoned by the very institution he lifted to glory? This is the story of the general, a quiet revolutionary who demanded respect, delivered immortality, and received ingratitude in return. Alfred Ernest Ramsay was born in 1920 in a quiet Essex village in what he called a wooden hut. No electricity, no hot running water, genuine poverty. His family couldn't afford the basics until the 1950s. At 14, young Alf left school to work as a greengrocer's apprentice, his Saturday shifts preventing him from playing organized football. But football called to him. After a 2-year hiatus, he returned to the game, joining Five Elms Amateur Club. Even then, teammates nicknamed him the General, not for barking orders, but for his thoughtful approach and tactical intelligence. As a right back for Southampton and later Tottenham Hotspur, Ramsay wasn't the fastest. He knew it, opponents knew it, but what he lacked in pace he made up for with an extraordinary football brain. He could read the game 3 moves ahead, positioning himself perfectly to nullify threats. At Spurs, he became the cornerstone of their innovative push and run system, helping them win the 1950-51 league championship. But it was November 25th, 1953, that changed everything. Wembley Stadium, England versus Hungary. The final score, 6-3 to Hungary, England's first home defeat to foreign opposition. Ramsay was on that pitch, witnessing English football's tactical naivety being brutally exposed by the magnificent Hungarians. As he walked off that Wembley turf, humiliated, something crystallized in Ramsay's mind. English football was living in the past. The tactical gap wasn't just evident, it was embarrassing. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a wake-up call that would shape his entire managerial philosophy. In 1955, age 35 and forced into early retirement by injury, Ramsay took charge of Ipswich Town, a club languishing in the 3rd Division South. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. In just 7 years, he guided this unfashionable Suffolk side from the 3rd tier to the pinnacle of English football. 3rd Division champions in 1957, 2nd Division champions in 1961, 1st Division champions in 1962. Only the 3rd club in history to achieve back-to-back promotions to the top flight.
But it wasn't just about results.
At Portman Road, Ramsay was quietly developing something revolutionary. Attacking midfielders who could defend, players flooding central areas instead of hugging the touchlines. He was creating the prototype for what would become known as the wingless wonders. The Football Association couldn't ignore Ipswich's meteoric rise. In 1963, they offered Ramsay the England job. But he had conditions, non-negotiable conditions that would change English football forever. I want complete control over team selection. For decades, England teams had been chosen by the International Selection Committee, a hodgepodge of club directors who often interfered based on politics rather than performance. Ramsay demanded the committee be abolished entirely. The FA, desperate for success and with a home World Cup looming, agreed. Then came the moment that defined his tenure. At his first press conference, this quiet, reserved man made the most audacious prediction in football history. We will win the World Cup. The media scoffed. This was 1963. England had just suffered embarrassing defeats. But Ramsay repeated it game after game to his players. We will win the World Cup. It wasn't bravado. It was a calculated psychological weapon, instilling unshakable belief in his squad while setting impossible to ignore expectations for the entire nation. Ramsay's wingless wonders wasn't just a catchy nickname. It was a complete reimagining of how football could be played. He abandoned traditional wingers entirely, creating a narrow 4-4-2 formation that could morph into 4-1-3-2 against stronger opposition. The system was built around control. Nobby Stiles, the tireless holding midfielder, would win possession through tough tackling and distribution. The midfield four would sit deep, swamping opposing attacks. Bobby Charlton was given the freedom to roam from his deeper role, no longer confined to the wing. Every movement was rehearsed. Every player understood their exact role. There was little room for star treatment. Even popular goal scorer Jimmy Greaves was dropped for the final when Geoff Hurst better suited the team's needs. The journey through the 1966 World Cup showcased Ramsay's calm leadership. After a goalless draw with Uruguay and an unconvincing win over Mexico, England found their rhythm. The 2-0 victory over France signaled their growing momentum. The rugged 1-0 quarterfinal win against Argentina, where Ramsay controversially called the opposition animals, further solidified belief. Then came July 30th, 1966, Wembley Stadium, England versus West Germany. After a late German equalizer forced extra time, many managers would have panicked. Not Ramsay. He calmly pointed to the exhausted Germans and told his players, "Look at them. They're finished. You've won the World Cup once. Now go out and win it again." Geoff Hurst's hat trick. The 1970 World Cup in Mexico promised redemption. England had an even stronger squad than 1966. Leading 2-0 against West Germany in the quarterfinal with 20 minutes remaining, victory seemed certain. Then Ramsay made his substitutions, replacing Bobby Charlton and goal scorer Martin Peters in the sweltering heat. Germany roared back to win 3-2 after extra time. On May 1st, 1974, the FA made their move. Not a face-to-face meeting, not a dignified send-off, a phone call. After 11 years of service, 69 victories in 117 matches, and England's only World Cup triumph, Sir Alf Ramsay was sacked with all the ceremony of firing a temp. The treatment was disgraceful. No alternative role offered, no consultancy position, no recognition of his vast experience. Ramsay was pushed into the wilderness. The financial settlement was insulting. His salary at dismissal was just £7,200, less than some third division managers earned. His redundancy payment, a measly £8,000. His successor, Don Revie, immediately received £25,000 annually, more than 3 times Ramsay's final salary. But the cruelest cut was his pension. The Football Association awarded him £25 per week. £25 for the man who had delivered their greatest achievement. As Ramsay aged, the situation became desperate. His beloved wife, Lady Victoria, was forced to auction off his cherished England memorabilia, World Cup medals, caps, photographs, just to make ends meet. The man who had turned down an estimated £280,000 in commercial opportunities during his England tenure, believing it wrong to profit from the national cause, found himself in virtual poverty. In his final years, Ramsay developed Alzheimer's disease. The brilliant tactical mind that had outwitted the world's best was slowly fading. On April 28, 1999, in a Suffolk nursing home, Sir Alf Ramsay passed away aged 79. The man who had given England football its greatest moment died largely forgotten by the institution he had served so faithfully. The football community mourned, but the official tributes from the FA were shockingly sparse. Today, every England manager operates within the framework Ramsay established: complete control over selection, tactical autonomy, and the Euro 2020 final. He was building on foundations laid at Wembley in 1966. The saddest part of Sir Alf Ramsay's story isn't that he died alone and forgotten. It's that the man who asked for so little was given even less in return. He never sought personal glory, refusing to join the World Cup victory lap, crediting his players entirely. He never commercialized his success, believing it wrong to profit from England's cause. Yet this man, this quiet revolutionary who delivered England's greatest sporting achievement, was abandoned by those who benefited most from his genius. Sir Alf Ramsay deserved better. He deserved the gratitude of a nation. He deserved financial security in his final years. Instead, he received ingratitude from the very institution he had elevated to glory. But we can remember him properly. Every time England takes the field with a manager in complete control, every time they deploy disciplined tactics over individual showboating, that's Sir Alf Ramsay's legacy living on. If you believe legends should never be forgotten, drop a like and comment your favorite England memory. Subscribe for more stories that football history should never forget, because some stories, like Sir Alf Ramsay's, deserve to be told properly.
The tragedy of Bobby Charlton, how he lives, is sad. And it didn't start with his death in 2023. It began decades earlier, after surviving the tragic crash that was the Munich air disaster in 1958. Most people think Bobby Charlton lived a charmed life. World Cup winner, Ballon d'Or champion, Manchester United legend. But what if behind all those medals and praise was a man many couldn't stand? What if the greatest English footballer of all time was actually one of the loneliest? Bobby Charlton's career looked perfect from the outside. He scored 249 goals for Manchester United, a record that stood for decades. He captained England to World Cup glory in 1966. He won the Ballon d'Or that same year. He survived Munich when 8 of his teammates died. The public saw a hero, a gentleman, a role model, but those closest to him saw something very different. The first crack appeared in his own family. When Bobby married Norma Ball in 1961, it sparked a feud that would tear the Charlton household apart for over 40 years. His brother Jack, also a football legend, watched as Bobby slowly drifted away from everyone who had supported him. The tension got so bad that Bobby stopped seeing his own mother, Sissy, after 1992. Think about that. He didn't speak to the woman who raised him for 4 whole years until she died in 1996. Jack Charlton was furious about this. In his 1996 autobiography, he openly blamed Norma for turning Bobby against his family. Jack said Bobby had completely changed after marriage, becoming cold and distant. Bobby hit back hard, calling Jack's claims about his wife absolutely disgraceful. In his own book, years later, the two brothers, who had once been best friends, now couldn't stand each other. Bobby even admitted he just didn't want to know Jack anymore. This wasn't just a private family matter either. The media covered their bitter feud extensively. Here were two England World Cup heroes, brothers who should have been celebrating their shared success, instead washing their dirty laundry in public. It made Bobby look stubborn, prideful, and unable to put family before his wife's feelings. But the family drama was nothing compared to what happened at Manchester United. Bobby's relationship with George Best, his teammate in the famous Holy Trinity alongside Dennis Law, became absolutely toxic. Best was 9 years younger than Bobby and represented everything about the swinging 60s that the older, more conservative Charlton couldn't understand. Best famously said about Bobby, "I wish I could hear him say fuck just once." This wasn't meant as a joke. It showed how uptight and holier-than-thou Bobby had become. Best saw Bobby as someone who looked down on others, someone who thought he was morally superior to everyone around him. The tension between them got so bad that they literally stopped passing to each other during matches. Can you imagine two of the greatest players in United's history refusing to work together on the pitch because they hated each other so much? Best also accused Bobby of being part of United's problems in the post-Matt Busby era. When Best was only 22, but already past his peak, he felt it was time for older players like Bobby to step aside. Instead, Bobby clung on, and Best saw him as someone blocking the club's progress. Meanwhile, Bobby grew increasingly frustrated with Best's drinking and unprofessional attitude. With manager Frank O'Farrell failing to take control, the dressing room became a battlefield where these two legends allowed their personal hatred to fester. The breaking point came in 1972 during Bobby's testimonial match. This should have been a celebration of his career, a chance for teammates to show respect. Instead, George Best refused to play. He initially claimed he had an ankle injury, but later admitted it would have been hypocritical for him to take part. Best did turn up to watch, but he left after just 5 minutes and went to a pub, where he reportedly threw darts and eggs at a portrait of Bobby Charlton. Think about how humiliating that must have been. Your own teammate, someone you'd shared incredible success with, publicly rejecting you on what should have been your special night. It became a symbol of just how isolated Bobby had become within his own club. Denny Law, the third member of the Holy Trinity, also had problems with Bobby. Sources say Bobby was not on speaking terms with both Best and Law at various points. The United dressing room in Bobby's final years became so toxic that former goalkeeper Alex Stepney recalled long days when they would simply not speak to each other. This wasn't just personality clashes, it had real professional consequences for the team's performance. Manchester United's decline in the early 1970s coincided with these internal feuds. The club that had conquered Europe in 1968 was relegated to the second division by 1974. While Bobby left in 1973, many felt his inability to bridge the generational gap, and his conflicts with key players contributed directly to the club's struggles. His conflict with Best was so severe it affected their on-field partnership, with both players admitting they stopped passing to each other during matches. Even after retiring, Bobby couldn't escape controversy. In 1970, he'd been caught up in the Bogota bracelet incident in Colombia, where he and Bobby Moore were accused of stealing jewellery. Though Bobby wasn't arrested like Moore was, and the charges were eventually dropped, suspicion lingered around both players. Later, in 2005, many Manchester United fans were furious when Bobby publicly apologised to the Glazer family after their controversial takeover of the club. Fans saw this as Bobby being completely out of touch with ordinary supporters' concerns about American ownership. The pattern was clear throughout his life. Bobby Charlton had a talent for creating distance between himself and the people who should have been closest to him. Whether it was family, teammates, or fans, he seemed unable to maintain warm relationships once conflicts arose. His reserved, shy personality, which the public saw as humble and dignified, often came across as cold and judgmental to those who knew him personally. Best even made cruel jokes about Bobby's family problems, sarcastically naming Bobby's mother Sissy as his biggest influence. This showed how Best was willing to exploit the family rift to further needle Bobby, creating a complex web of personal conflict that went far beyond simple professional disagreements. The saddest part came in Bobby's final years. In November 2020, he was diagnosed with dementia, the same disease that had already claimed his brother Jack earlier that year. The irony was heartbreaking. Just as the two brothers might have found comfort in each other during their declining health, it was too late. Jack had died in July 2020, taking any chance of a proper reconciliation to his grave. Bobby withdrew from public life completely after his diagnosis. The man who had once been the face of English football became invisible, hidden away in a nursing home. When he died in October 2023, after a fall that caused trauma to his lungs, it felt like the end of an era, but also like the conclusion of a very lonely journey. His death left Sir Geoff Hurst as the last surviving member of England's 1966 World Cup final team. The tributes that poured in after his death were genuine and heartfelt. Prince William attended his funeral at Manchester Cathedral. Manchester United honoured him extensively with black armbands, wreaths and a minute's silence. The football world mourned a true legend, but even in death, the complexity of his character remained. Yes, he was a footballing genius and a survivor of terrible tragedy, but he was also someone who struggled to maintain the relationships that should have sustained him through life. Perhaps that's the real tragedy of Bobby Charlton. Not that he died, but that he lived so many of his later years estranged from the people who mattered most. His feud with Jack lasted 4 decades before their 2008 reconciliation. His conflicts with Best and Law poisoned his final years at United and contributed to the club's decline. His inability to connect with teammates and modern fans left him increasingly isolated as football moved beyond him. Yet despite everything, when Bobby Charlton died, the nation grieved, because for all his faults, for all the relationships he damaged, he was still ours. He was still the boy who survived Munich, who lifted the World Cup, who scored those incredible goals. The tragedy isn't that people hated Bobby Charlton, it's that he made it so hard for them to love him. But in the end, perhaps that makes his story more human, not less. Even legends can be lonely. Legends can be lonely.